Hello and welcome to another episode of podcast organized by South Asia Research Institute for Minorities, SARIM. I'm your host Furqan, and it's an absolute pleasure to have to line an insightful conversation with someone whose work is helping shape our understanding of minorities, nationalism, and social discourse in South Asia. Today, we are joined by none other than Mr. Harshul Singh, who is an international politics master's graduate from SOAS University of London. Harshul Singh's academic journey and research delve into deep issues of caste, Dalit epistemology, and politics of nationalism in South Asia and beyond. His work spans global youth led research projects, policy analysis, and political discourse in South Asia. Today, we are going to discuss the vital role that academic research, universities, and leadership platforms can play in challenging the othering of minorities and fostering inclusivity within both academia and society. So, Harshal, thank you so much for joining us for the first time ever on our platform. So, without wasting your time, I would give out the floor to you and would request you to walk us through your journey, your motivation, how your family supported you, and why did you choose this platform or the theme of international politics. Over to you, sir.
Thank you so much, Furqan. It really means a lot, and it's very appreciative the kind of work you and your team at South Asia Research Institute for Minorities are doing. Very critical and very deeply related to that of my research engagement and that of lives of our marginalized communities. Very appreciative on that note. So thank you for this space, and hi everyone. I'm Harshul, and of course, thanks Furqan for such an effectual introduction note. It really means a lot. So I am a recent graduate from SOAS University of London, and where I pursued my master's in international politics and went to do my studies in advanced research. And currently, I'm based in India, and I'm working in research projects here. So more or less, I think my life has been more engaged in recent time into caste studies and anti-caste tradition through research engagement, that through activism, and of course, I think it's really important to mention before we also delve into further conversation that I am a first generation Dalit student myself, and this is like how my like life journey may be, and this is how my life trajectory has been deeply intertwined in in more of my actions and more of my visions and my ideology. And this is how I have envisioned to embody myself as an individual. And I think it has been a lot of rich experience. I would say a lot of rich experience of negotiation in terms of exposure to a lot of things. Because also I'm stemming from my identity as a Dalit student and that of an individual coming from a first generation middle class home background. And I think, of course, there were a lot of hurdles, there were a lot of achievements in through, and there were a lot of support and other challenging things that came along. And I really think that everything that I have gone through, I have experienced from like schooling to university spaces to through my professional engagement has been a very much learning experience. And it really, really has developed me as a person who I am today and the kind of things I want to embody myself and the kind of thing that I'll give myself into towards more just and equitable ideals and thoughts. And I think, yeah, more or less, everything has been very much helpful and from personal identity to various economic challenges through my university engagement and experiences. And it has brought me a lot far to where I am. And I think it has been a very blissful and very rich in experience. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Harshal, for walking us through your life's journey and how choosing academics or the path of academia has changed your perspectives of understanding things. And yeah, you did say it had opened a lot of avenues for you as well. So, just deviating from the topic, or let's just stick into the topic. I would also be requesting you to walking us through the pure or academic definition of othering. What do you say? What do you consider as othering when we say for our viewers, for our listeners to gauge broad understanding of what is othering of minorities?
I think, yeah, no, it's very important. We set the context of this before we delve into like today's topic as well also. I think, of course, othering has a more or less negative connotation that the word carries, and it's more of what I have experienced, what I have observed through my engagement so far, and also through academic language and sense. I think is very differential and alienating experience the individual of minority marginalized groups has faced over time, and this is discriminatory in practice, and it has a lot of political dynamics within itself, and of course, it can be dehumanizing at times. This is what how Adring has been in, if you are to say, in South Asian context, coming from region that of caste or ethnicity context or factors, determinants. And I think Adring take place in very, very trivial senses. It can be explicit and it can be implicit in manners, in your actions, and in your personal spaces or in your professional civil engagements. So I think Adring is very dynamic. It's very much out there. It's very severely real, and of course, it really impacts the individuals who are experiencing this, who are differentiated, who are alienated, who really experiences this as an action or a behavioral response from that of someone who comes from a powerful, ascribed class religious position, and I think it really renders the person's psyche in a lot of negative and very vulnerable sense. And this is how I have observed and tried to develop a meaning for othering. And but again, othering carries a very severe negative connotations as per the word, and its use actions are very severe. And this is to add last bit of it. I think in current political and social onsets of South Asian, or particularly that of I think othering is very much out there, and it has transformed into various very critical nuances of its practices. And I think that's how we would be also engaging with othering in this context.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I'd also would like to add that it perhaps would have stemmed from the terminology of alterity, perhaps,
Mhm.
when you try to separate others from your own, let's say, circle, or from your own surroundings, or perhaps like you said, it's a very negative connotation, but it has now been deeply rooted and deeply practiced in, unfortunately, in our part of the world where we dwell. So, given your background, I'll move to our questions. So, giving your background in international politics and your focus, which is revolve around nationalism, how do you see the role of academic research in challenging or perpetuating the othering of minorities? You slightly touch upon this part in your initial introduction. Uh, in India, in journal, or particular, or in South Asian perspective as well, or let's say in beyond.
I think, yeah, of course, I think more or less my engagement has been largely in the past few years through academic platforms per se, and I think academia has a lot of power and a lot of potential in addressing this very much, which very pertinent problem of our time today, and I think it's very much out there, and we really cannot deny its very structural and institutional presence in our spaces. And I how I would like to also further mold and narrate the conversation, because my understanding, my experience emerged from academic spaces, and this is how I am critical and unsettled about. So I think academia has a lot of potential in helping us imagine, reimagine. This answer requires a lot of reflection, introspection, and I of course, as I imagine back in my mind, and academia has a lot of potential. It's a very true transformative power, and I think like in that spaces, in that very context, academia is a really powerful tool in addressing, and maybe this idea of perpetuation of these negative elements that we see out here today. And of course, it's also a space, and it's also a praxis where we can also address by maybe through dialoguing, through life narration, and through other methods to help people realize real resilience and hope in these sense also that comes from negative connotations of othering, differentiation, discriminatory practices. And I think for me, for more or less, I really believe in decolonizing, deharmonizing, and de-imperializing these spaces where it's a very dynamic and very critical question of our time, and I won't deny the reality and severity that it carries in today's context. And someone, of course, I think have been deeply engaging with caste studies, that of nationalism, that of politics, and the South Asian region, and the nuances it carries. And I think the very idea of othering, the very idea of inequalities or discrimination is very much out there, and through a lot of societal and very different dynamics, which are very sad reality also. But I think, of course, like my engagement so far in academic spaces has really helped me realize the kind of potential like academia as a space has for addressing these things. But also, I think you're very right. At some point, this is how I have experienced and I have observed in my engagement so far. At times, academic spaces are also very much probable for perpetuating these challenges. And I know, like, of course, for many would argue that academic potential, academic transformative potential has power to address these dominant paradigms and dominant powers and hold them accountable. And of course, through dialogic and narration, we can really truly imagine this praxis of things. But I think, in more or less sense, what academia has been, and which has been, it's a very blunt statement, it has been controlled by those who come from very powerful ethnic, religious, or class position, and who has hold a very strong grasp on these narratives that goes out there. And I think we really need to introspect and address at the same time of these dual nuances that are there. And for me, of course, there's a long way, and there's of course policy addressal to this. But I think to really more realize and actually achieve of these negative these othering, this discriminatory practice, this inequities. I think more like we really need some critical answers, and we really need to apply them in our applications. And for me, as a person, as an ECR who really sees this, is like, I also apply at times through the practice of decolonization, to practice of de-Brahmanization, to practice of inclusivity, diversity. And I think, of course, these are very ambitious, large terms and academic jargons, but I think they really carry some power, intrinsic power, in helping us imagine and helping us put forward those words, those penmanship, those voices which have been marginalized so far. And I think in that process, embodiment of that process, it will be inclusivity, it will be representation, it will be the academic, not academic, the activism, the scholarship of activism emerging from those who have experienced these discrimination and have imagined a more plural universal idea of understanding of just society would really help us out. But again, also it's a very stark reality and a very dark understanding and image of things, that the spaces that we aim to hold accountable, the spaces that we aim to provide us with a platform to question the power, are also the spaces that dominate and perpetuate these institutional, maybe implicit or explicit sense of discriminatory othering and others. And I think it's very dual and very critical reality of our times. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a stark reality. You very rightly pointed out about the those hands who control the decision making, or who have basically has power in controlling the narratives, or perhaps changing the narratives in that regard. So I'll since you've been the proponent of international politics and nationalism, you've been. I mean, it seems like that it's very much in your in your subconscious that you are willing to do something for your younger generation, and a person who has been extensively involved with youth-led global research projects such as IAPSS, right? And what do you think uh, is most effective way for universities, educational societies to bridge gap between minority communities and mainstream political discourse? And again, I would also request you to touch the element of political participation, and why we often see that people from Europe, community like Dalits, who have lesser representation in parliament, or in politics of India, or let's say in Pakistan, or in Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, or Nepal as well. So I would love to hear about your insights on that.
I think I think it really circles back to again academia and university spaces, and I think in my experience, which has been very a lot of exposition has been there, and all these little nuances and these negotiations of a conversation, maybe from person of people or agencies of power, and I think it has really taught me a lot, and I think of course I think. Universities has a lot of potential in helping us address these gaps that we are talking about. And of course, I think more or less there's a policy addressal through inclusivity and representation. But I think it also requires us to introspect the tokenized representation that also often comes here in this aspect. And I think it's a very important, very pertinent question of our time, maybe. And also, it really can help us imagine the true praxis of things, truly the true applications of things. And again, I really believe in the potential power of university and academic spaces. And someone who has spent so much of time and in daily experiences and daily negotiations from my positionality as a Dalit individual in these spaces, I really think there's a lot of effective strategy, there's a lot of effective power and effective hope and resilience that these spaces carries to help us maybe mobilize, help us maybe address and truly imagine the idea of representation, the idea of bridging this gap between the minority communities. And of course, I think there's a policy addressed to these questions, but also it requires a more introspective reflection from our ends, from also those who are in positions of power in these spaces to help and to embody, to promote the dialogues, the narrative, the authorship, the penmanship of the marginalized and minority community, but also I think also at the same time being reflective of being introspective that this representation does not get tokenized on the name of minority or marginalized, does not get tokenized on the race ethnicity aspect. But it's very appreciative, it's very intrinsic, it's very original at the same time, and it really includes people of those communities. And I think you would relate. Like not only the minority or marginalized get researched, they are also part of research. So I think that the real embodiment in bridging this gap. And I think this is where a university and academic spaces come in, because I think they are speaking to a wider audience. They're the dialogues that kind of they are holding and the kind of engagement they're holding with the young minds of a generation. I think they're addressing a wider audience. They are maybe influencing. They are maybe they're like advertising or they're endorsing a larger idea. I think it like there is no less wonderful place to talk about these very pertinent issues of our time. And I think, of course, like a lot of my research engagement surrounding nationalism, caste studies, anti-caste tradition has really helped me to imagine this embodiment, this resilience, this hope. And I think I also believe in some strong ideas of representation. And I think if we are able, if we can, and it also is a must to give spaces, to give due spaces to one those from marginalized communities, to those from minority spaces. I think that will be the true practices. That will be the true like accountability. And of course, I think it's due for a very long time. And you see, like there are a lot of young individuals who carry such potential and such transformative ideas. They carry such intrinsic values. And I think it is the space. It is through by providing them spaces, we give them voice, we give them the authorship space and platform, which really help us develop, which really help us to uh, like broaden up our horizons and understanding what does the idea of world universality that is so coming from those marginalized ranks would be someone who can truly imagine just an equitable society, because one who has experienced and suppressed so much of discrimination and dehumanization in psyche, nuances, in practice, they express it and physical. So I think that can really help us address lot of societal image. And again, I would say like it starts with inclusion, it starts with representation, but also one has to be conscious of this tokenistic approach. And I think that would really help us address a very larger and very critical problem of our time.
uh, would agree with the term that you used of tokenization, and then people who you said that there's a lot of research has been done on your community. The element of invisibilization also comes into play. I mean, we tend to forget people who are really who really matters a lot. Often, does do immense amount of work for their for activism or for raising their voices in a bigger platforms, such as the case of organizations like IDSN, right,
Yeah.
who which is actively involved in platforms at UN, and they are part of very huge capacity building initiatives uh, fostered for Dalit communities in particular. So the other question would be in regards to the epistemology of Dalits. Let's say your research explores the intersection of caste, Dalit epistemology, and social sciences. Like, how can institutions incorporate these perspectives into curricula to combat social division and discrimination? And
I think thanks for asking that. And while before I address like I think I should be very aware and conscious about this. The whole idea of my work, integrating Dalit epistemology and larger practice of curricula, social sciences, and that through as a medium, I'm addressing the problems and of authorship, of power, and of that of coming from caste, religious positions. It's an ongoing process, and there is no there's of course there's a lot of negotiation again, but I would say it's an ongoing normative and narration that I'm trying to work towards with. And I think having this done, having this established of the very idea of Dalit episteme, or that of Bahujan Adivasi, or that of very any marginalized episteme is not it should not be seen from the lens or aspect of needs to be done for a more just and equitable society. But I think that's the given that should be done, which is very due. And I think it has been it things have been very ignorant to not to see that. And of course, I think the very idea of appropriation, that the tokenism that we say, like how the marginalized get researched in this process while he's never part of the research. So I think it really speaks about a lot, and how these are ethnographic lives, like these are research lives, and how they're made redundant to that contextual sense. And I think this was my first view, first investigation that I when I was engaging in my own individual capacity. All of these jargon and these canons, I really could not find, and like, really could not place myself in any of these narratives. And I think that really put me in a very like a difficult and very like critical understanding that I cannot imagine, I cannot see myself. And that really brought me to a larger idea, like there's a lack of episteme, there's lack of epistemic representation for those who from our community. And I think really intrinsically, if it, like when we're analyzing, it really speaks a lot. The idea of episteme, the idea of representation, the idea of your own authorship, penmanship, reading the views and words and narratives of your own people. I think really help us imagine a lot of things. It holds a very transformative power, of course. And I think, like, of course, decolonizing, de-Brahmanizing, and de-imperializing our spaces is a much important due process, and which should be ongoing, which should be reflective of its tokenization also at the same point. And I think it's such a long due that these things has been kept in very ignorant aspect. These things have been kept in a very appropriative aspects, and how this is also a sense of othering. I think if we are to extend, I think it really needs to be incorporated, addressed. Of course, there would be again a lot of policy branches to this, but I think a lot of things starts at our own individual positionality, how we are engaging, how we are holding a dialogue, how we are holding a narration. And I think it starts from there of giving due spaces, giving due representation, which has been wrong for so long. And I think again, I think I'll wind this up. And I think it's true imagination through the power and potential of these academic spaces that where we can really actually apply these applications and really help a wider audience, a wider generation, wider young minds who are engaging in university spaces to truly imagine, or maybe not a more radical, but maybe a just and equitable idea of how things ought to be. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much, Harshul, for giving the insight regarding let's say, taking the ownership. I mean, we must not forget that we are the ones who lag behind, and we're the ones who are being, let's say, represented. I would say sometimes we tend to be represented in a manner that we are, let's say, helpless community, or we belong to
Very
an individuality which puts us at a very negative situation.
like a very
Yeah,
pitful and very
yeah,
vulnerable
it's a
discourse.
pitfall. It has to
Yeah.
be. Let's say the connotation of minorities itself is a negative connotation, right? Why we people from your part of the world, or your community, should be considered as minorities, right? Why don't we consider them as equal citizens, or equal human beings, in terms of connotation, or in terms of representation? Okay, so thank you so much, Harshul, for walking through us regarding the terms of tokenization and taking the ownership, and let's spread this as an awareness campaign, that we should all be standing up together for our own voices, rather than letting the others to speak on our behalf, right? So that we can present our picture in a much better manner, because the element of misinformation also comes into play when we tend to label certain minorities or certain community with certain let's say, comprehensions, or the connotations of or let's say, the element of hate involves, or it gets triggered a lot, because we are living in the digital age, where the flow of information is very frequent, and it gets spread like a wildfire. So people tend to catch that perspective, or to let's do something violently, to respond in a violent manner. So, your journey, and the question regarding, again, your education, and your theme, and how you spend your time in Delhi. So your journey from studying political science in Delhi, to advancing research at SOAS is very inspiring. And like I said, it's you could become a role model. You are basically a role model for your community to rise up from the ashes. What were some of the key moments, or influences that motivated you to pursue this path of academia, or activism, or social research? And how did your family support you in these endeavor? You did talk about your family support in the beginning of our talk.
Thanks, and I think it's very humbling also. I think it is a long way to go in truly like how I'm embodying myself and how I am developing and envisioning myself. But I think yeah, it will be all for good reasons and just reasons. So I think, yeah, of course, more or less, my lot of experiences that has been so far has been very much of learning and rich experience. And I would say, of course, it have been very challenging for them. My parents, I think, I really give them the due respect and due like the things that they have done for me, out going beyond one's way and one's measure to make our ends meet and all. It was very humbling, and but I think they had this vision, this also an Ambedkarite understanding within Dalit families to have your kids educated and to have your kids develop academic temperament, academic psyche, to have them speak English. I think that's how the true emancipation liberation has our Dalit families have really inspired and really envisioned for the coming generation. Again, it's a very strong Ambedkarite ideal. I think more or less of my academic journey and journey so far, I think I was very much made aware, consciously made aware that I am a Dalit, and through a lot of implicit and explicit behavioral actions of those who were around me, who were more conscious of my Dalitality than I was in my younger years. And I think this very whole idea really affected my psyche some way, my understanding and of myself, of my community. And there was always an idea of vulnerability. There was always an idea of inferiority that was imposed, that was rendered upon us, and it was usually in social gatherings, in classroom spaces. And of course, I say like this is a very severe reality of our time. So I think this was made aware to me through household practices, through that of peers, that of classroom at a very young age. And like at a young age, you're very confused. Why am I to be considered inferior? Why am I to be of a lesser, of any lesser proposition? Why? And just because being born a Dalit, and I think it really spoke a lot to me that time. And really, gradually over time, I have really I take a pride in that. I have really like engaged in a lot of Ambedkarite literature, a lot of Ambedkarite anti-caste tradition literature, and in that essence of doing things, I have realized how education is really a transformative power. How education is really a true emancipation for us, for those in our communities, because it not only makes not only gives you place, it not only gives you platform. It gives us academic temperament to like uphold ourselves. It gives us some sort of dignity, and of course, the kind of resilience that comes through. And I think that was the starting point, like the spark in me, where I realized, no, like getting educated, getting yourself in to have that power to hold those of these casteist understanding and notions to hold them accountable, or just not to consider yourself any inferior. I think that was a true praxis, true intrinsic value for me, where I realized it has to be academic research for me, or maybe research for me, so that I can really embody the true power and true dignity, or how Ambedkar said, the manushki of our lives. And I think this has been so far the thing that I am very much emotionally and very morally invested in, I know Dalit epistemology also. I think comes from this understanding in itself that there needs to be true inclusion, there needs to be true representation that comes from an insider perspective of our own authorship, of our own voices, and how we have to uphold ourselves to that of greater power, and how to hold things accountable. I think like it's a very blunt, very strong to say. I think we are more or less Dalit community is fighting for itself in every particular spaces, either being academic, social, or corporate of that self. I think every Dalit individual out there is fighting for itself, and I think the fight is very much of a dehumanizing process. It really like impacts and affects you in the long run. And I think holding up the very power of education is like something that has that really brings resilience. It really adds to our idea of why to question, why to critique, or why to write, or why to vision a just society. And I think more or less that really brought me to Delhi University for my bachelor's, and then I went to SOAS, of course. And really like the things that I have been engaged so far now. I think it's all about the idea that maybe I carry larger vision for my community, that our episteme, our writings, our voices have to be upheld, and no more ethnographic and research lives of our community. We are there to speak for ourselves. We are there to write for ourselves, and I think we just not to make a reductive entity of our lives, something as objective ethnographic studies. I think that has been my motivation so far. Maybe a bit critical in its own sense, maybe a bit radical in its own sense, but I think I'm morally and emotionally invested in this to truly imagine the practice of these things. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much, Harshul, for such an inspiring, response, for such an insightful response in terms of taking again the ownership or the epistemology of your thoughts. Is quite reflective in a manner that you have now taken the initiative to do the work for your own community. I would like to also ask a question similar to the, let's say, othering versus the opposite of it. I mean, Dalits are considered still minorities in India, let's say. Uh, but when you talk about this population, it's a huge in terms of numbers. So where do we put the definition of minorities? So, or do we have to reintroduce, reinvent? You talk about dehumanization, or you talk about dehumanizing, harmonizing such things. Are we now at a path to reinvent the definition of minority itself? Like, I mean, at certain points or at certain portions, a certain community has to be considered as minorities, or let's say the proportion, that amount of proportion has to be considered as minorities, and if it gets beyond that, then it becomes majority. Let's imagine that we have that amount of majority of population, we are still be considered as minorities. So I want you to touch upon that.
I think it's a very smart question, and it really speaks to a lot of discourse. It really speaks to a lot of claims also. But I think this is how I like I would start and really narrate the answer. There's a very strong type Bahujan leader of our community, and he was Kanchiram, and so he's considered a very noble man who really changed and transformed the Bahujan politics in northern India. And he used to have he said this line: "Jiski jitni sankhya, uski utni hissedari." So I think it really speaks a lot. And see, like of course, our community holds a really good section of the population. And I think if we are actually analyzing in progressive and pragmatic political senses, I think the true power lies in the number of our community. And but I think what we are here exploring is the idea of if this is a minority and the whole versus the number of population. I think minority is not our communities. Minority are lived lives. How the experiences of our community has been, which has been marginalized and minoritized by those who are in affluent, ascribed ethnic, caste, religious positions. And I think it's really like it's a time to really redefine the whole definition discourse on minority and who holds the actual power in current societal politics. But like again, that this is how I would further it. Our community doesn't hold that access to platforms and spaces. Our community does not hold that resilient agency to access these spaces. It is still hegemonized. It is still co-opted by those who comes from these affluent ethnic, religious, and caste positions. And things have been very cunning in that sense that the system has been very institutionally cunning to make sure the minority remains does not have access to these much of things. And I would say, in terms of social parameters, my community has a long way to go, or that of any Dalit, Bahujan, Muslim, Adivasis community in India has a long way to go. And in terms of education, or in terms of employment, in terms of other things, I think these are the lived minorities of India, and are the kind of very devastating experiences they have to live through, suffer through in everyday experience of their life, really makes them marginalized. But I think academics would have a lot to say about this whole discourse of global majority and minority. But I think it really like puts me in a really reflective position also at the same time, because again I'm in negotiation here with my own community and with that of larger like statistics that are given to me. But I think of course we really need to redefine this whole idea of minority and who actually holds the power. But I think this institutionally things have been so well that they do not let minority actually realize the kind of potential that they have. They do not help them actually have access to this understanding. And I think that is what validates and keeps them in power, and versus the others not in. So yeah, I think that would be it.
Yeah, thank you so much. And also, it would be a very tougher situation because uh, very recently the countries are now have taken the other, like most majority of the countries have now taken the path of autocratization. So it would become a very doubly difficult for communities like yours. But yeah, I've been the proponent, and I've also been the witness of your community's resilience, which are you know fighting from all front, who are which are responding to the attacks that are being perpetuated against them. So I remember again another activist from your part of the world. who did say that we are actually facing the 360-degree attack, attacks from the current or incumbent government, or the system. I would say I won't blame the government. I would talk about the system here. So thank you so much, Harshal, for such an insightful discussion. You have very professionally walked us through your professional and academic life. You have very you know your responses are very powerful in terms of taking the ownership and the authorship of your community. You have negated the notion of tokenism, tokenization. You did seem to have a very much approach, the approach towards rising up from the invisibilization, the notion of invisibilization. Through your academic research, I see there's a lot of potential in this mind. And thank you so much once again for your time and for bearing such questions. I mean, I know I just didn't give you a lot of time. It's just a very short time. You said you were pretty much up to the mark. And any like last message for our organization, SARIM, or even for myself, uh,
Yeah.
keeping the current uh, situation in mind? Just 30 seconds.
No, no, of course, of course. Like first of all, of course, thanks so much for this wonderful and appreciative space. And I think something last, I think that really brings us maybe beyond borders, beyond these transaction spaces. I would say it's this idea of solidarity from these marginalized spaces that we all share and we all ought to build. So I think that will be the true transformative power and in really changing, addressing, and questioning a lot of things. And like this is also like goes this sloganeering in India, like Dalit Muslim Bahujan Ekta. So, of course, from all marginal rungs that we are coming from, I think the solidarity, like unconditional, unapologetic solidarity, will be help us imagine a true praxis. I think that will be the last thing.
Thank you so much, everyone, and see you next time with another episode.